Stages Theater was founded in 1993 by Brian Kojak. The goal was to establish and maintain an aggressive production schedule for the purpose of accelerating the development of the artists involved. Stages Theater was located in an industrial complex in Anaheim, California, and sat 50 to 60 patrons depending. In 1993, Stages Theater produced 26 primetime and late-night productions. This was one of our late-night shows which performed after the primetime show, with minimum set changes and even fewer rehearsals. As a reminder, this is a theater production, designed and intended to be performed for a live audience. This video is a record of the production, but unfortunately the lighting, sound quality, and the camera's focus, or lack thereof, cannot compare to the actual live performance experience.
I shall begin with the fact that I was born in the year 1850 to a large fortune, endowed beside with excellent parts, inclined by nature to industry, and fond of the respect of the wise and good among my fellow men, with every guarantee of an honorable and distinguished future. And indeed, the worst of my fault was a certain impatient gaiety of disposition, such as has made happiness of many, but such as I found it hard to reconcile with my imperious desire to carry my head high and wear a more than common grave countenance before the public. Hence, it came about that I concealed my pleasures, and when I reached years of reflection and began to look round me and take stock of my progress and position in the world, I stood committed to a profound duplicity of life. Many of men would have blazoned such irregularities as I was guilty of, but from these high views that I had set before me, I regarded and I hid them with an almost morbid sense of shame. It was thus rather the exacting nature of my aspirations than any particular degradation in my faults that made me what I was, and within even deeper trench than in the majority of men, severed in me these provinces of good and ill, which divide and compound men's dual nature. In this case, I was driven to reflect deeply and invariably upon that hard law of life which lies at the root of religion, and is one of the more plentiful springs of distress, though so profound a double dealing. I was, in no sense, a hypocrite. Both sides of me were in dead earnest. I was no more myself when I laid aside restraint and plunged in shame than when I labored in the eye of the day at the furtherance of knowledge or the relief of sorrow and suffering. And it chanced that the direction of my scientific discoveries, which led wholly towards the mystic, reacted and shed a strong light on this conscience of the perennial war among my members. From this discovery, I have been doomed to a dreadful shipwreck. That man is not truly one, but truly two. I say two because the state of my own knowledge does not comprehend beyond that point. Others will follow, others, they will outstrip me on these same lines, and I hazard that man will be known for a mere polity of multifarious, incongruous, and independent denizens. I, for my part, from the nature of my life, I advanced infallibly in one direction, and in one direction only. It was on the moral side that in my own person I learned the thorough and primitive duality of man. I saw that of these two natures that contended in the field of my conscience, even if I could rightly be said to be either, it was only because I elements radically both. And from an early date, even before the course of my scientific discoveries had begun to suggest the most naked possibility of such a miracle, I had learned to dwell with pleasure as a beloved daydream at the thought of the separation of these elements. If each, I told myself, could be housed in separate identities, life, they would be relieved of all that was unbearable. The unjust could go his way, delivered from the remorse and penitence of his mortified twin, and the just walk steadfastly and securely upon his upward path, doing good things that brought him pleasure, and no longer exposed to the hands of his most extraneous evil. It was the curse of mankind that these incongruous were thus bound together, that in the agonized womb of consciousness, these polar twins, they should be forever struggling. How then were they disassociated? I was so far in my discoveries, as I have said, when a side light began to shine upon the subject of my laboratory table. Certain agents I found had the power to shake and to pluck back the powers that make up our spirit, even as a wind might toss a curtain. Yes, I managed to compound a drug by which these powers should be overthrown, and a second form and appearance substituted. It's nonetheless natural to me, because these were the expression, and they bore the stamp of the lower elements in my soul. I did hesitate long before putting this theory to a test of practice, for I knew well that I was death, for any drug that so potently controlled and shook the very fortress of identity might, at the least scruple of an overdose, or at the least inopportunity in the moment of exhibition, utterly blot out this immaterial tabernacle to which I looked to change. But the temptation of the discovery, so singular, profound at last, overcame the suggestions of alarm. I had long since prepared my tincture. I purchased at once from a firm of wholesale chemists a large quantity of a particular salt, which I knew, from my experience, to be the last ingredient required. Then late, one accursed night, I compounded the elements. I watched them boil and smoke together in the glass, and when the evolution had subsided, the strong glow of courage, I drank off the potion. The most racking pains succeeded, a grinding in the bones, deadly nausea, and a horror of the spirit that cannot be explained in the hour of birth or death. Then, these agonies, they began quickly to subside, and I came to myself as if out of a great sickness. There was something strange in these sensations, something incredibly new. And from its very novelty, incredibly sweet, I felt lighter, happier, younger in body. Within, I was conscious of a heavy restlessness. A current of disordered, sensual images running like a mill race in my fancy. An unknown, not innocent, freedom of the soul. There was no mirror in my room at that date. That which stands there now, it was brought on later for the very purpose of these transformations. That night, however, was far blown in the morning. The servants of my house, they were locked in the most rigorous hours of slumber, and I, determined to venture out in my new shape as far as to my bedroom, I crossed the yard. I stole through the corridors, a stranger in my own house, and coming to my room, I saw, for the first time, the appearance of Edward Hyde. I must here speak by theory alone, saying not that which I know, that which I suppose to be the most probable. The evil side of my nature was less robust and developed than the good. It had been much less exercised and much less exhausted, and hence it came about. The body of Edward Hyde was so much smaller, slighter, and younger than Henry G. Even as good shone upon the appearance of one, evil was written broadly and plainly upon the face of the other, an imprint of deformality and decay. But yet, when I looked upon that ugly idol in the glass, I was conscious of no repugnance. Rather, a leap of welcome. This too, it was myself. It seemed natural and human. I observed that when I would wear the semblance of Edward Hyde, none could come near to me without a visible misgiving of the flesh. This was, as I take it, because human beings, as we meet them, they are commingled out of good and evil. And Edward Hyde, alone in the ranks of mankind, was pure evil. I lingered but for a moment in the mirror. The second and conclusive experiment had yet to be attempted. It had yet to be seen. If I had lost my identity and must flee from a house that was no longer mine, and hurrying back to my lab, I once more compounded the draught. I took it. I suffered the racking pains once more. And I came to myself. The face and the stature of Henry G. That night, I had come to the fatal crossroads. The drug, it had no discriminating action. It was neither diabolical or divine. But it shook the doors of this prison house of my disposition, and that which stood within ran forth. This side of me was growing larger, and it tempted me until I fell into slavery. I had but to drink a cup, to doff this body of the once noted professor, and to assume, like a thick cloak, that of Edward Hyde. I met with one accident. An act of cruelty to a child to rouse the anger of the passerby. The doctor and the child's family both accompanied him. There were moments when I feared for my life. But in order to satisfy their just two resentments, Edward Hyde brought them to the door and paid them in a check drawn by the name of Henry Jeckle. But this danger, it was easily eliminated from the future by opening up a different account at a separate bank in the name of Edward Hyde, and win by slipping my hand back to him. I provided my double with the signature. I thought I sat beyond the reach of fate. Some 2 months before the murder of Sir Danvers, I had been out late on one of my adventures. I awoke the next morning in bed with somewhat odd sensations. I looked about me. I noticed the decent furniture and tall proportions of my room in the square. But something still kept insisting that I was not where I was, but in the room where I was accustomed to sleeping, in the body of Edward Hyde. I smiled at the notion, and drifting back into a comfortable morning doze, my eye fell upon my hand. Now, the hand of Henry Jeckle was professional in shape and size. It was large, white, and comely. But the hand that I looked on now, in the yellow light of a mid-London morning, was small, corded, knuckly, and with a short growth of hair. It was indeed the hand of Edward Hyde. I rushed out of my bed, and coming to the mirror, my eyes, the sight they saw, it and my blood was turned to something exquisitely thin and icy. Yes, I had gone to bed as Henry Jeckle, and I had awoken Edward Hyde. How was this to be explained? And then, with a bound of terror, how was this to be remedied? It was daylight. The servants of my house were up, and my drugs lay in my cabinet. A long journey down 2 pairs of stairs, through the back passage, and across an open court from where I stood, horror struck. I could conceal my face, but what use was that when I had such an obvious disarray of stature? And then, an overwhelming sweetness of grief. It came upon my mind that my servants were already used to the comings and goings of my second self. I had soon passed through my house for a pool. Drew back it seemed at such an hour, in such an array. 10 minutes later, Dr. Jeckle was sitting with the darkened brow at breakfast. Small indeed was my appetite. This part of me that I now had the power of projecting was a being that grown and became more nourished and more exercised, and it came about as of late that the body of Edward Hyde had grown in stature. Once, very early in my career, the draught had totally failed me. Since then, I've doubled, and with one assurance of death, I tripled the amount. I now felt that I had to choose between these two natures. Jeckle, now with the most sensitive apprehensions, now with the greedy gusto shared and projected. With Edward Hyde, he loved the adventures and the pleasures, but Hyde was indifferent to Jeckle, or but remembers him as a place to conceal himself from pursuit. To cast in my lot with Jeckle was to die 1,000 appetites which I had long suppressed, and as of yet, began to panic. To cast my load in with Hyde was to die 1,000 interests and aspirations, and to become forever despised and friendless. The bargain, it might appear unequal. Yes, I prefer the discontented doctor. He was surrounded by friends, cherishing honest hopes. But I made this choice with an almost conscious reservation, for I never destroyed the clothes of Edward's Hyde. It's still there, ready in my cabinet. But for 2 months, however, for 2 months, I led a life of such severity as it had never yet attained to. And I reaped the rewards of an approving conscience, but the lower side of me made me suffer throes and longings as if Hyde was struggling after freedom. Then, in an hour of moral weakness, I once again escaped my laboratory door and compounded the transforming draught. Instantly, the spirit of hell awoke within me and raged. My devil had been long caged. It had come out roaring with glee. I mauled the unresisting body of Sir Danvers, tasting delight from every blow. And then, I was struck with an overwhelming feeling of terror running through my heart. I escaped from the scene, and running through the lamplit streets of London, coming back to my house, Hyde! He had a song upon his lips when he drank the draught. From this point forward, Hyde wasn't possible. I went back to the untempted lifestyle of Henry Jeckle. But the lower elements of my conscience wanted out. And on a January day, I was standing out in the square, comparing myself to my neighbors. And suddenly, I felt the pains once more. And in that instant, it was once again Edward Hyde. I sit here now before you, under the last of the old powders. Half an hour from now, Henry Jeckle, he won't be able to think his own thoughts. I picture myself sitting here, weeping. Will Hyde die alone? Or will he have the courage at the last moment to give up? This concerns another than myself. And so, I leave you now. And I take the body of the unhappy Henry Jeckle